Okay, class, we're about to start section 7.4 percents in problem solving. Okay, now we're going to go through the same problem solving process we have in the past. You have step 1, understand the problem. You need to define your variable. Step 2, translate the problem into an equation. Step 3, solve the equation. And finally, step 4, interpret the results. Now we go here to our first example. It says approximately 11% of all films are rated PG-13. If 350 films were recently released, how many of them were rated PG-13? So we want to have X, which is equal to PG-13 films, because that's what we're trying to find, how many PG-13 films there are. Now we need to write an equation. It says 11% of all films are rated PG-13. 350 films were recently released, so that would be your all films. How many of them were rated PG-13? So X stands for PG-13 films is equal to, it's 11%, which is 0.11, times the amount of films that are released, which is 350. So it's X equals 0.11 times 350. Now, we write this out. We have X is equal to 0.11 times 350. Now we just multiply. We take 0.11 times 350, and that gives us 38.5 films. Now the problem is we know that we cannot have 38.5 films. So we know this is going to be approximately 39, and I should have put PG-13 films. So we were right here. There are approximately 39 PG-13 films when there are 350 films released. Okay, now we go on to the next problem. Now it says here, tuition for a math class was $380. Books for the class cost $135, and a calculator cost $30. What percentage of the total cost was for books? So we had the tuition for the math class, the books was $135, and the calculator cost $30. We need to add all of these up. Well, actually, we could do that later. We could say X is equal to the percent of the total cost for books. Now, before we go on, let's add up these values here so we'll know what the total cost is. We had 380, we had 135, and we would have 30. So we would add these together. That's 14 carry our 1. So that's $545. Okay, that is the total cost. So now we want to write out this formula. It says what percent, which we know is X because we don't know what the percent is, of the total cost. The total cost is $545, which we did over here, was for books. So that equals to whatever books cost. Now we could substitute in the value for books, so it'll be X times 545 is equal to the book cost, which is $135. So now we write out this formula. We will have X times 545 is equal to $135. Now we could rewrite this. Let me put this dollar sign here. we could rewrite this as 545x is equal to 135. Now we want to get x by itself, so we would divide each side by 545. And we would be left with x is equal to, now we need to take 135 divided by 545. And it's a long decimal, so what we're going to do is we're going to round to the nearest percent. But first, let's write out this decimal. I want to write out maybe the first 5 places of this decimal, which would be 0.2477, and then I'll round that 0 to a 1. Now, we want to write this as a percent, so we look at this third digit here. That would take this up, so this would be x is approximately 25%. Because remember, we have to move this decimal 2 places to the right. So we have to round this place value here. And this is 5 or more, so that will become 5. So this would be approximately 25%. So the percent of books for the total cost is about 25%. Now, we scroll down to the next problem. It says here, the nutrition facts on a box of crackers said that 1 serving of crackers contained 4 grams of fat and listed this as 6% of the recommended daily fat intake. What is the recommended daily? Yes, we had a brief little interruption there. But now what we have to do is define the variable. It says, what is the recommended daily fat intake? So X is the daily recommended fat intake. Okay, so now we need to write out our equation. Now, we're told here that 1 serving of crackers contain 4 grams of fat and listed this as 6% of the recommended daily fat intake. So we would have to ask ourselves, 6%, which is 0.06 of the daily fat intake, is equal to 4 grams. Because remember, it's 6% of the whole recommended daily fat intake. So 6% of that value is supposed to give us 4 grams. So now we go through and solve. So we will have 0.06x is equal to 4 grams. Then we divide each side by 0.06. And x is equal to, now we have to take 4 divided by 0.06. And that will give us, actually, it's going to give us a long decimal, but we're going to approximate it to the nearest whole number. So it'll be basically x is approximately 67 grams, because you're going to get 66 and a lot of 6s. So now we'll write this out. So we could say the daily recommended fat intake is about 67 grams. And that's it for that problem. Okay, our next example, it says a union contract was settled for 3.5% salary increase. Find the new salary of a worker who was making $48,000 under the old contract. So X is the new salary, because that's what we're trying to find. Now, this is what happens. We know we're trying to find the new salary. So we will have X is equal to, now the old salary was $48,000. And we have to add on the pay increase. The pay increase would be $48,000 times the 3.5%, which is 0.035. So we'll take the old salary plus the pay increase, and that will give you the new salary. So now we go through here, and we have X is equal to $48,000 plus $48,000 times 0.035. And now we will multiply. We're going to multiply the 48,000 times the 0.035. You could easily type that in on your calculator, which I'm basically doing here off to the side to get the answer. So that would be $1,680. So now when we add these two values together, we'll get $49,680. So that is the new salary. So you can write that down. The employees' new salary after the wage increase is $49,680. And that is the final answer for that problem. Now this next example is somewhat similar to the previous example, except for we're dealing with a decline. It says the school district experienced a 7% enrollment decline. If last year enrollment was 6,850 students, how many are enrolled this year? So X is equal to this year's enrollment. So now what we would do is we would have X is equal to, we would take last year's enrollment minus this year's decline, which would be last year's enrollment times 0.07 to reflect the 7% decline. So now we will have X is equal to 6,850 minus 6,850 times 0.07. So now we do the multiplication first. So we will have 6,850 times 0.07, and that will give us 479.5. Now when we subtract this, we have to subtract 6,850 minus 479.5. And that gives us 6,370.5. So now we know we cannot have half of a student. So this will be approximately 6,371. So our final answer is this year's enrollment after a 7% decline is about 6,371 students. And that is the final answer. Now we move on to finding percent increase and percent decrease. The percent of increase or decrease is always based on the original amount. Therefore, percent of increase is amount of increase divided by original amount, and percent of decrease is amount of decrease divided by the original amount. Now, I learned this formula that I think will make it a little easier. What you need to do is take the larger number minus a smaller number divided by the original number. And this works for the percent of increase and also for the percent of decrease. The larger number minus the smaller number divided by the original number. Now we come down here to example 1. It says in 2005, approximately 484,000 correctional officers were employed in the U.S.